Now it's with great pleasure that I introduce you to our speaker, Dr. Aziz Shaibani. Dr. Shaibani graduated from the University of Mosul in Iraq in 1983. He completed his neurology residency and neuromuscular fellowship here in Houston at Baylor College of Medicine, and he's board certified in 5 different areas. He is clinical professor of medicine at Baylor and director of the Nerve and Muscle Center of Texas. He is the principal investigator of over 80 clinical trials and author of many articles and abstracts, as well as an award-winning book, I think you saw a slide earlier, entitled Video Atlas of Neuromuscular Diseases in 2014. And this was such a bestseller that it has been reprinted 3 times within 2 years. He's a fellow of numerous professional associations, as well as president-elect of the Texas Neurological Society, which is the largest neurological society in the nation, advocating for over 1,400 neurologists in Texas. So Dr. Shaibani is very active professionally as well as personally. He believes in community organizing as a means to a better society. He's past president of the National Arab American Medical Association and the Arab American Cultural and Community Center. And he's currently president of the Arab American Educational Foundation, which is tasked with establishing chairs of Arab studies at American universities. They endowed chairs at Rice University and the University of Houston. This was more recently in 2015, where they're now working on establishing a Center for Arab Studies. And here at the museum, we're very honored that Dr. Shaibani is an active member of the Art of the Islamic World's subcommittee. And I'm personally impressed that Aziz makes it to all of our Wednesday subcommittee meetings at noon without fail, on time. So as you may know, leaving the medical center here at lunchtime is no easy feat. So this always impresses me. And somehow, perhaps between midnight and 2 a.m., Dr. Shaibani finds time to write about art in the brain. I don't know how he does it. In his lecture tonight, he will explain the magnificent power of the brain in relation to aesthetic experiences. So please join me in giving a very hearty welcome to Dr. Shaibani.
Thank you very much, Amy, for putting me in the hot spot right away. I have to be at your expectations now. I have to do a very good job. I'm not an artist, and I don't have a degree in the history of art, but I will talk about the brain. So I'm going to choose some themes, some works of art, and I'll try to explain the brain mechanisms. But before we start, I would like to thank the leadership of the museum for elevating the taste of the Houstonians by having an excellent stationery collection and by inviting and hosting so many good exhibits throughout the year. And I'd like to thank Gary Tintro, who is here today, for his leadership. And I would like to thank the Committee of the Arts of the Arab Worlds, whom I joined 10 years ago, and from which I learned a lot about art and about aesthetics, and I have enjoyed great friendships. So I would like to thank the co-leaders, Francie Neely and Sima Ledvergian, for their active role to build a very good section here regarding the arts of the Arab worlds. There are so many, most of what has been written about aesthetics is from philosophy. Hundreds of books about why we see beauty and how we see beauty. When you watch a nice painting, it provokes some emotions. Whether you have knowledge about it, whether the painter intended to do something, but some works, when you look at them, you get emotionally charged. And why is that? I mean, if, say, this painting moves me because it reminds me with a picture of my mom, for example, but looking at the picture of your mom does not do the same effect. very often portrait of individuals is more appealing than the individual himself or herself, like the Mona Lisa. I mean, has been hundreds of years, attracted so many people and has so many enigmas. The original person did not become famous, and there are many people who painted the lady that Da Vinci painted, but did not get the same claim. So what is the reason that we get these emotions? And these emotions, they don't have to be joy or beauty. Some people get disgusted when they see some art. Some people get dizzy. Some people get sad. Some people get nervous and tense. And even there are some reports of some people get orgasm when they watch some work of art. So it is very difficult field to explore. For example, this is a kitsch art. Kitsch art is well known for being over-sentimental and has poor aesthetic properties, but people like it just, they know for the fun of it. They know it's funny, but they like it. But if you look at one time, usually you don't want to look again and again and again, like this is for Kincaid. I'm sorry for people who like Kincaid. I mean, I like some of his works too, but it is a kitsch art. While this one, for example, for Monet, the Japanese bridge, the more you look at it, the more you want to look at it. It has captured some essence that the other one did not capture. This is one of the pieces in the collection of Sheikh Hussa Salim, which we are lucky to have here in the museum for the last 2-3 years. It's from Syria, 13th century. Just the patterns and the color, it does provoke some emotions, whether you like it or not. Well, if you look at a sketch that I drew last night, I can tell you for 25-30 minutes about my emotions. I'm attracted to it, I like it, but I don't think it will capture any of your emotions or interest. It does not capture any essence. Now, Gary, if you are interested in buying this piece, please let me know when you finish, before I change my mind. So what is the reason that some arts really capture your mind and your emotions while others not? Some people say, well, if you put this in the CNN and Gary makes a reception here and there's another reception in another state, it will become famous and people start analyzing it and talking about it. It's really not that simple. There's something more. Yes, marketing has a role, but there's something else that explains this, and that's what we're going to talk about. Just one point I want to mention, a word of caution. I'm not a reductionist. Like, I'm not going to reduce aesthetics into cell biology. This is a school in Europe called mechanical materialism, when they say the brain secretes mind like the liver secretes the bile. I don't belong to this philosophy, because I think aesthetics and other aspects of mind have different rules and laws. Yes, they are based on biology. As much as biology is based on physics and chemistry, but it has its own rules and laws. So the mind has its own rules, although it is based on biology, and you can alter mind by medication, by alcohol, by anything, but they are different. And there's nothing called the center of art in the brain. When you enjoy a piece of art, the whole brain will light up. The memory, the emotions, the reasoning. But we are going to reduce this just for the sake of the study, so that we know what is what. And obviously, without the interviewer, without the viewer's eyes, without the beholder's vision, there's no art. So it is very hard to imagine a nice piece that no one look at it. Therefore, we need to look at the brain of the viewer to analyze what is happening in the brain. What are these artists capturing that non-artists cannot do? Here's the brain. I mean, if you look at the brain, just 3 pounds of very jelly-like structure. You can hold it in your hand. It is really, if you see it, I mean, we see it in the anatomy and the autopsy, it is more repulsive than inspiring. Just jelly-like material. But this is the center of sentiments, of emotions, of love, of hate. And this is the brain that has evolved over millions of years. Throughout this evolution, throughout facing so many challenges, it has acquired so many sophisticated skills and abilities. In the old Egypt, the pharaohs, whenever they wanted to mummify a queen or a king, the first thing they would scoop out and get rid of it was the brain. It has no value. You scoop it out, and because they thought the heart was the center or the seat of intelligence and imagination. Even Aristotle thought that the brain was a cooling mechanism for the heat that's generated by the heart. Even those who thought that the brain had something to do with thinking, they could not prove it. Just philosophy. You say something, I say something. So this school of studying the brain as a tool of mind is very new. The first department of neuroscience in this country was opened in 1964 in California. Now, to study the aesthetic properties, the beauty in the context of the brain, this is even newer. The term neuroaesthetics was coined in 1999 by Samir Zaki. He's a neurologist, a neuroscientist in London, UCL, who opened the first institute for neuroaesthetics in London. He's the one who used neuroaesthetics in 1999. So we are just scratching the surface. I'm not going to give you all the information that will provide you with explanation for even 1% of what we know about art. But this is the beginning, that we can subject the taste of art and the emotions associated with art to the functions of the brain. This is the beginning, and this is a very solid ground to start research in this area. The brain consists of two hemispheres. The right one usually is more emotional, and the left one is more reasonable. The right one is the one that senses beauty and senses the emotions of others. The left one is trying to rationalize. And so the right controls the left side of the body, and the left controls the right side of the body. So the left ear is connected to the emotional hemisphere, and the left ear is connected to the right hemisphere. And studies have shown that if you ask your husband for a gift for the birthday party, if you whisper in the left ear, he's much more likely to be responsive than if you whisper to the right ear, especially if you do it in the bedroom. There are two major components. There's the limbic system. This is the colored part, which exists also in animals. This is the system that is responsible for emotions and memories. And then the upper part is basically developed as the animals evolved through the evolutionary scale. And we try to subject our emotions to the social norms by using the upper part of the brain on the lower part, which is the lower part, again, is basically concerned with memory and emotions. That is why drug addiction is more common in artists, because they really want something to release that inhibition by the upper brain on the limbic system, so they'll be released totally. Like Sufism, like when Sufis try to release that social inhibition, so they have totally different experience. But some people teach themselves how to do that release without using drugs or alcohol. And some people really, their brain is structured in a way that the emotional system has some kind of independence. The brain is covered by 4 millimeters layer called cerebral cortex. This cerebral cortex consists of 6 layers. Each layer has a different function. And this is the place where most of the analysis and logic and reasoning and language and all these activities occur. This is just one cell in the brain. The brain has 100 billion cells. Each cell can make communication with 1,000 cells around it through synapses, connections. So each synapse can inhibit or excite the impulse that goes through it. So you can imagine this huge network of connections and memory, how much it can do. It creates a surreal picture that basically portrays part of the complexity of consciousness. And through this lens, we have to look at the brain and study the brain and look at the aesthetic experience and other features of mind. Now, part of the brain is called the visual brain. The human being is a visual creature. I mean, if you look at your other senses, your vision takes the majority of your, you learn about the world around you mostly through your vision, less through your hearing or through your smell or your taste. Therefore, a large part of the brain is dedicated for vision and analysis of visual images. So this is the eye, and the light hits the eye. This is the lens, and then goes and hit the retina. The retina will change the photons, the light, into electrical signal and send it to the nerve here, it's called optic nerve. And the nerve enters the brain from each eye, crisscross and go back. They're called optic radiation because it's like a fan. And then go back to the back of the brain, which is called visual cortex. This is the cortex that's concerned with all aspects of vision. Visual cortex. Now, many people still think that we see with our eyes. We see with our brains. I mean, many people lose their vision, and now there's a small device you can put in your tongue, hook it to a camera, and they learn how to see and walk and read. The brain doesn't care. The brain doesn't care where the information is coming from. It just cares that the information goes to the right place. So we don't see with our eyes. The eye is a very sophisticated machine, but really you can see with that eyes. And for example, I show you this. How many of you see the old lady in this picture? How many of you see the old lady? Okay. How many of you see the young lady? Most of you see the young lady, a very young group of people. So this is the young lady. This is her eyes. You see, this is her chin. And the old lady this is her nose, and this is her chin. So young and old. It is the same eye, it's the same picture, but you see it differently. You have different brains, different experiences, different memories, and different ability to construct pictures. And once you train yourself 2-3 times how to see both sides of it, you'll be able not to forget. You'll build a new pathway in the brain to recognize it. That reminds me with a nice statement for Helen Keller that the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. So the impulses go from the eyes to the back of the brain. When I was in medical school, all what I was told that the back of the brain is responsible for processing the vision, visual cortex. Really, we didn't have much of information about the details, but now we know through the research of Samir Zeki in London and the research of the Nobel Prize winner Eric Kandel of Colombia and Ramachandran of California, we know a lot. For example, this part of the brain, which is the occipital one, consists of multiple zones. The first zone here is the post office to receive all the information. Then it distributes that to different places. V3, for example, is responsible for perception of form, the form. V4 is perception of color, and it has different cells for different colors, principal colors. And this is all studied very well. There are a lot of books about it, experimentations. V5 is responsible for motion, and people who get stroke in that area, they will not see motion. How miserable is that? So you just see things are frozen. And if you have a damage in that area, you will not be able to enjoy, for example, Muna Hatoum. Muna Hatoum has a very nice exhibit now going on in the Menil. I encourage you to go and look at it. You will not be able to see a lot of her work because it's kinetic work. Kandinsky work, a lot of kinetic stuff, you will not be able to see it. Interestingly, that the brain also has a large area to represent the face, because we are creatures that live by recognizing faces. You know how important it is to recognize different emotions, different expressions in the faces. I know some people like breasts, some people like buttocks, but there's nothing more than the face that reflects the center of emotions and the center of beauty. And then from the back of the head, the impulses will go to the memory area to match them with whatever you have of previous pictures and memories. And then once a decision is made, it will send it to the emotional center. So you'll feel sad, you'll feel elated, you feel happy, you feel disgusted. And so this is the circuit. This is the eye, and then sends the impulse to the center of the brain, then to the back, and then they process it in terms of color, in terms of shape, in terms of form, in terms of kinetic properties, and even texture, and then send it to the memory area to compare it, and then to the emotional center. One more slide about the brain anatomy, that also this area, that's an important practical point. The brain center sends two pathways. One called the what pathway goes down. It tells you about the details of the image, what it is, what's the color, what's the shape, what are the other properties, physical properties. And send a fiber or pathway up, it tells you, they call the pathway of where. Where is it spatially? What's the background? So sometimes we see patients with a stroke, say example, they hit this area. You show them a picture, they tell you this is a farmer, this is a cow, this is a river, but they cannot tell you this is a forest. So you may have a different perception, but this is the beauty about studying the brain functions, because these are two different pathways. Now, how do we study the brain? Such a complicated and complex structure is not easy to study. That's why some people say we cannot study the biology of the brain. Study the behavior of people. That would be a surrogate of the brain function, but that's not enough. So we study it different ways. Some of them, people who get damaged brain from stroke or drugs or genetic problems. Each school has different pros and cons. Or we study the EEG, like we have a professor in the University of Houston. He studies the EEG. Everyone goes to the Manila Museum. He gives him a helmet to put on his head. It has electrodes, and they go through the different places, and he will report their emotions and what happens to the brain. And he tries to collect 2,000 images and then average them and see what happens to different part of the brain. Or we use the functional MRI. When you use different parts of the brain, we use more blood. Like if I look at something, the area of the vision needs more blood, more oxygen. And the MRI captures that, so it lights up. So through that mechanism, we can map the brain. All studies have shown that when you feel beauty, regardless of the source of the beauty, listen to music, see nice painting, talk with someone you love, this part of the brain light up. It is right behind the eye medially. It is called the medial orbital frontal cortex. This is a common pathway. And this is connected to the pleasure and reward system. That means it will lead to the production of endorphin, which is the morphine that you produce in your brain, and dopamine, which is the rewarding chemical. So beauty makes you feel better. Art makes you feel better. That's why it's very important to make art accessible to the public. So now we go back to how this happens. So you are sitting here, you're looking at me. So light will come from me to your eye and then goes to the brain. So obviously, this is not enough to make anything. Just lights come on my face, hits your eye, and the eye will change it to electrical signal and goes to the brain. You need something in the brain to make you see things and analyze them. So Helmholtz, the Nobel Prize winner, suggested there are two things. He called it the bottom up and the top down. The bottom up means our brains, throughout millions of years, have managed to be wired to perceive things. And I'll show you examples of that. And this is across cultures, across ages, across languages. On the other hand, the top down, through our experiences and memories in life, we have formulated so many positions in our head that will go down and meet with the other thing and produce the taste. So when you look at the picture or something that you like, your aesthetic properties, the emotions that you get, is a combination of something wired in your brain and something you have learned. And we will focus on the something that's wired because that is unique. Like Chomsky suggested, the universal grammar, that all the languages in the world, regardless of where they are, they share a similar grammar. That's Chomsky. So probably there are some universal codes for perception of art too. And these codes apply to music, to art, to literature. But today we are dedicating this talk for the visual art. And a few weeks ago, I was talking with a friend. He told me, we keep talking about Mozart and Beethoven and their aesthetic properties and nice composition. He said he had a friend that when he listens to the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven, he gets dizzy, nauseated. So I told him there are some maybe that specific thing was associated with bad thing in his mind. But this should be pleasant to most people, even if they don't know anything about it. It should be soothing. And here's an objective evidence. They got 19 people with very bad seizures. People with seizure, they lost consciousness, and they did not respond to anything. They played one of the sonatas of Mozart, and during that period when it was played, the seizure activity stopped. When they stopped it, it went back. There's a code in the brain, like a key in a hole. Now imagine if they played a country music by them, it would have driven them crazy. Like what drive every one of us. Okay, so basically, high music has some kind of properties that even if you don't know about it, it does induce some changes in your brain. Also, I want to touch on one point, that so many things we do, including the taste of art, are unconscious. We perceive only 2% of the energy around us. If you go to the hospital, you want ultrasound, you will not hear the ultrasound because it's beyond your limits. If you go to a place that they show infrared lights, you will not see it. Snakes use infrared, bees use ultraviolet, but we are very limited. Only 2% of the energy around us, 2%, we sense visually. And our brain is really equipped very well to make the best of use of this 2%. Now, what even more is, even what reaches to our brain. You know, you are sitting now, you get millions of impulses come from your eyes, your vision, your hearing, your skin, even your heart and your stomach. You don't hear about it unless you have a heart attack, you get chest pain, then you become conscious about it. If you have abdominal pain and diarrhea, then you better know about it. I mean, the pulse will go to the brain and you become conscious. So a lot of stuff we behave, but we don't know. And I'll give you a nice example about how unconsciousness contributes to our sensation of art. One time, a psychologist did this experiment. He showed a group of people these two on one side and these two pictures on one side. I think you'll need to see the actual pictures to judge. This is just a slide. And 2/3 of them said these girls are more beautiful than these girls. He didn't know why. Only 1/3 of them said these are more beautiful than those. The difference is that these girls have dilated pupils. Experimentally dilated their pupils. Because pupil dilatation is a sign of sexual arousal. When you have high epinephrine in the blood, pupils dilate, your skin changes, your muscle change, your brain. So it's a sign of sexual arousal. Even animals are attracted to females with dilated eyes. And this tree is called belladonna. It grows in Asia and Africa. They call it belladonna, it means the beautiful lady, because in Italy they use these shrubs for beauty, as cosmetic in Italy for a long time when they go to parties. But it has some systemic bad effect, and so they call it the deadly nightshade. So now it is used in many medications. We go to eye doctor, they use the dilate your eye, they use atropine, which is a derivative of this. It is used for menstrual cramps, abdominal pain. So unconsciously people say this is beautiful, and many of the choices we make every day, you love this, you love that, you hate this, are based on unconscious information. Now, what are the genetic trends that leads to wiring of our brain, and we make decisions about things? There are so many things basically are really, even an infant is wired to do them. For example, if you see this picture, a large image always means to you closer. Small image means far away. I mean, the picture doesn't show far or close. This is just the brain knows it. It is wired to do that. Picasso, the peace dove, if you look at around you, you don't see lines. You see edges, light and dark areas, you see appendages, you see curves, but you don't see lines. How come if I draw this place, from the lines you recognize that this is the lecture room? How come if you see this dove, you can tell this is a dove, although if you look at the real dove, you don't see any lines on it? That's the most important question and the most important discovery, not by a neurologist, but by an artist. We never know who was the first person in the history or before history who drew the first sketch. Whoever that was, he opened a wide visual culture that we are all enjoying. So how did this happen? The brain, it seems that in the cortex, in the back of the brain, when you say the visual area, there are cells that sense lines. The same cells that sense dark and light shadows, they sense lines. Not only that, they sense lines with certain orientations. For example, Samir Zeki brought some electrodes, put them in the back of the monkey, back of the brain, put in the visual area. And he showed the monkey lines of different orientation. When the line was vertical, you see this curve? The electrical activity was very nice, so it stimulated that cell. He changed the line into oblique, this slight shift. More oblique, it almost disappeared. Horizontal, there's no signal. So the cells in the brain are sensitive to different orientations of lines. And you all know that lines are the basics of all the other forms. Textures, forms, anything you want to talk about in art, you cannot talk about it without the thought of having a line. So that is the major thing. Mondrian, this is a very famous boogie-woogie for Mondrian. People all around the world, they love it, they watch it. It is very serene and very tranquil. It has no tension. Just you look at it, there's no tension in it. And that's not a coincidence. Again, there are cells in the back of the brain that are sensitive to the rectangles, while other ones are sensitive to squares. If you look at the Monet, artists use tricks to trick you. The best artist is the one who make you feel like you are seeing a 3-dimension, but it's a 2-dimension picture. And so you look at the Monet, if you really have if you measure the luminance, this is called the sunrise. If you measure the luminance of the sun, it is not more bright or luminant than the rest of the thing, or the background. He used colors and shimmering of light to give you this feeling that this is the sun, and this is really a shimmering light. And if you keep looking at it, you see all the depth of it. So he tricked the brain to make you feel like there is a sunrise. There's also in England, there's a group of people, mostly Bridget Riley, had a school called optical art, when they really use different ways, experimentation, to activate the motion part of the brain, the one that we talked about. If you look at this, if you really look at it, you'll find different movements, right, left, fast, slow, because she's using that center. And I will not tell you anything about that except that A and B are exactly identical. And you'll not believe me, but that's what it is. This is created in the MIT using different tricks and shadows, but it is A and B are identical. If you look it up and cover one of them, you'll see what I mean. Now, an interesting thing here that artists use. Your retina, when you look at a picture, if you look close to it, you are going to use part of the retina called the fovea. It is very rich in cones. There are two visual receptors on the retina, cones and rods. The cones are responsible for detailed colored vision. Rods, black and white, coarse features. Coarse features. So fine features, coarse features. So if you go home, I don't know what you see now. What do you see? Do you see Einstein or Monroe? Who sees Einstein? Okay. Who sees Monroe? You don't, because you are not close to it, except one. Maybe you have a mutation. I need to study you later on. Now, if you go home and pull up this picture, Einstein and Monroe, and look at it. When you look close, you'll see different image than when you look outside. What they did basically, they brought these two pictures, they removed the fine features from one, and they removed the coarse features from the other. So when you look close, you see one. When you go, so if you want to read the emotion of anyone, your husband, you want to see how he feels, don't look him in the eye, look at him his nose. You'll lose him. Look him out of the corner of your eye. I'm teaching you many tricks today. So out of the corner, because now the coarse features, the muscles under the skin, low frequency coarse features, you will see much more than if you just focus on the nose. And I'll show you Mona Lisa, one of the enigmas of the Mona Lisa. I mean, of course, this is a picture. If you really go and look at the actual picture, which is a small picture, if you look at the nose, you will not see the smile. If you just go far and look with the corner of your eye, you'll see the smile. That's one of the enigmas, and I'll tell you why. When you look close, like here, you are going to see the detailed features. Now, there was a school of painting called the fumato that he used. Fume means like fumigation, smoke. So fumago is a school where they use the painting without any sharp distinction between lines. Very smooth transition between one place to another, one paint to another. Like that, it looked like a smoke. Really, you don't see very much details when you look at the Mona Lisa. There was another Mona Lisa, someone else did it. It is very sharp, but it does not create the same emotion. So he did two layers. The lower layer, the bottom layer, he used coarse featuring. And the top one, he used the fine, very fine featuring. So when you look directly to it, you will not see the smile. When you look to the side, the corners of the lips, of the mouth, will elevate. Because when you look from far, you are going to see the low frequency coarse features in the second layer of the painting. And so it looked like smiling. So this is the neuroscientific explanation for the one of the enigmas of Mona Lisa. Another chapter we're going to talk about, is the brain supposed to depict reality as it is? I mean, if that's the case, you all have phones, go and shoot pictures in the evening, watch the pictures, and no need for museums. Gary will be upset, will not need anything. But really it is not. If you look, this is a very nice ladybug on the morning dew. Very nice. Yeah, nature has so many nice beauty to it. But the function of art is not to copy them. Like when Beethoven did not have to copy the voices of nature, like birds and water and leaves. No, but you know that this was the source of his inspiration. Also, art does not have to copy this. So what does art do then? That's the question, right? If it does not copy, so what? Everyone can scratch, put just something like I did, and that would be art? I think Matisse got it. Long time ago, he said the artist seizes the most essential character. The most essential character of objects so that they may give to reality a more lasting interpretation. So what does that mean? The brain, through evolution, tries to capture the most essential elements of the objects. For example, if you're in a jungle millions of years ago, and you see behind the bushes a yellow dot here, yellow, 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 you better know that this is a tiger and you run away. You don't have time to analyze every piece of it. When you look at your wife to see if she's sad or she's happy, you better have essential points to look at, and you recognize that and you run away, right? Because it is very essential for the brain not to waste its energy and analyze everything, but to focus on certain points. And this is exactly the function of artists too. That's why Samir Zeki called artists our neurologists. Artists capture the essence of the material. But again, this is still theory. How can we bring this really to this? Why different kind of arts, whether it's Ottomans or Americans, whether it is 1,000 years ago or now, it has some kind of universal impact on emotions. I will explain to you in the next few minutes a very important concept, the essential elements, capturing the essence, which is the function of the brain and the function of the art. Capturing the essence. What is an essence? You can find a lot written in philosophy about the essence, but not in the neuroscience. In medicine, proteins in the body, you can determine some active domains. If you just take them, these are the ones that are responsible for the action, and you ignore the rest of the protein. This is a disease called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, the most common inherited disease, affects children who are 4 or 5 years old and kills them in their 20s or 30s because of a mutation of dystrophin. Dystrophin is a big protein controlled by a big gene. So it is very hard to deliver dystrophin to the muscle. So what people did? What they did, they identified only 10% of the total protein that's responsible for its action, called microdystrophin. And now it is much easier to deliver this to the muscle. So they determined what are the active domains, what are the essential features, what is the essence of the protein. And then, so how do we translate this to art? This is a very famous experiment, was done by a Nobel Prize winner about 50 years ago, Oxford scientist. What he did, he studied the seagull. If you go to Galveston, you see many gulls. The seagull, he said, when the chicks, once the chick hatches, the first thing they do, they go and peck on the red spot on the upper mandible. They peck on it like this. He said, okay, why this is that something genetically? Because once they hatch, they do this. So he tried to study this. So he showed them just the head of a dead seagull. They had the same reaction. You see, this red means magnitude, how many times they pecked on it. He showed them a standard model, a piece of wood, and it has a red dot. Also, they pecked on it. Then he showed them only the beak of it, and also they tapped on it. Surprisingly, strangely, crazy, when he had a stick that has 5 or 4 points, red spots, they went crazy. Crazy. How come they preferred this over the original stimulus? This is called a peak shift, a shift from the original stimulus, because if you magnify or exaggerate the essence, you get more emotional response. So imagine if this seagull come here to this museum and opens a museum or open a door and puts multiple paintings here, has multiple red dots, 4, 5, 6, up, down, different configuration. And you allow these chicks to go there and try to look at these. They will buy this for $1 million. They will go and do marketing. They love it. They may not know why. But this is because this is the essence is exaggerated and led to emotional response in the brain. Ramachandran did a very interesting experiment. He incentivized, he rewarded a rat to go to the rectangle. If it goes to the square, no cheese. Go to the rectangle, cheese. Then he was surprised that when he showed the rat a longer rectangle, again, the rats liked it much more than the original triangle. Because the rat has identified a theme here called rectangularity. So say this rectangularity is associated with food, not that space. And what does this have to do with art? If you look at this, most people say that this sketch is much more beautiful than Marilyn Monroe picture. What the artist did, he got the main features, the essential features that she has, the hair, the lips, and the bend. And so he focused on them, magnified them, highlighted them. And that has become more beautiful, more appealing than the other one. If you look at this, an Indian old statue, very famous. What they did basically, they brought a woman and they brought the average person body. They subtracted the average person, and then the woman came with big breast, big buttock, and the twist of the body. And then he exaggerated that. So now you are stimulating multiple areas like the chicks that we talked about, and that's one of the sources of emotions that you get when you this. Like if you look at this, Turner was very famous for the seascapes. He did this when he was figurative. He liked to do figures. And you can see here the storm, you can see the strained sails, you can see the people are drawing, you see the waves. But after 40 years, when he moved to the abstract school, he did this. Many people think that this is much more powerful. Now, he does not give you figurative things. You cannot really. But number one, you can see only the mast. This is the mast. But he played with the light. He played with the waves. He played with the rain to give you the powerful effect of nature. So he captured the essence of nature. And also, it left something for you to figure out. That's an important part of art. You need to vague things, provoke people more. And for example, if you see a naked woman behind a shower curtain, it will be more appealing than you see a naked woman just in the bedroom. And most people agree on that. Because there's something for you to figure out. And that's an important thing in the aesthetics. This lady spent a lot of time in the Galleria, and you can tell, I mean, this is the shoes and the handbag and the top, they match each other. You all face this problem every day. I mean, buying a skirt is only the beginning of it, and so you have to go and match it with this and this and that. So what does this matching business is about? Is it just some haphazard, or there's some biological basis for it? The brain has this character of recognizing, grouping things. It groups things to make sense, put things into a group. How many of you see a Dalmatian here in this picture? You see a Dalmatian? So many of you see that, although it is not very clear. I mean, now it is clear, but now it's not clear. People try to recognize, to put things into group, to recognize and make sense. And in order to escape or to get close, depends on what they are seeing. Most of the time, the decision is made correctly, except if a skirt is too expensive, for example, or a shoes is too expensive. So, metaphors. We'll go and watch the movie of El Postino about Pablo Neruda, and it tells you about metaphors. Metaphors basically say something and connect it to something else. Professor Tillis and Professor Laris are in this field and tell you that metaphors are very powerful in literature, in writing, and even in music and painting. Most of the writings about metaphors are in the philosophy, not in the neuroscience business. We knew from the medical school that schizophrenic are characterized by concrete thinking. Concrete, rigid, concrete thinking means they really don't see associations. So if you bring a schizophrenic, tell him her heart is made of stone. She has a heart of stone. He would tell you that, yeah, I imagine that small stone, even not precious stone, just small stone sitting on her chest. Or you tell her she has a heart of gold. He doesn't know kindness is related to the metaphor. Doesn't know that. So why is that? People over the years did not understand why people understand this, the Babylonian or the Assyrian winged bull, the head of the human, symbol for intelligence, the wings, freedom, flying, the bull body, a symbol of strength, and the 5 legs, a symbol of stability. These are all metaphors. What happened is just recently, they found that, of course, for a long time, we know the brain of schizophrenics has poor fiber density. What we didn't know the significance of that. This is a very important discovery, very new. The child here, when the child is born, within 7 years, they have many connections, more than twice the adult connections have in the brain, synapses. Synapse is the connection in the brain. After that, after 7 years, you need to have space for new memories, new experiences to understand. So a set of enzymes like scissors, cutters, go and cut these redundant connections. And this is controlled by genes, one or more genes. In the schizophrenia, the most important risk factor is C4 gene mutation, the one that controls these. So maybe they overdo it, so they lose these fibers. So what happens is, some people, some of these connections are left, so they become synesthetes. Probably 2% of you probably have maybe 2 or 3 people here. They see music instead of listening to it. If you play music, they see it. If you give them numbers or figures, they see them as colors, like 1 is blue, 2 is red. Common, synesthesia. And it is more common in artists, because these are the guys who need the connections to make the metaphors. More common in certain families, because the gene that controls that. So that has created a whole culture of art. Very amazing, isn't it? So because the colors and these 2 areas in the brain are very close, and that wire was not cut off. So there are 30 types of synesthesia, and the most common ones are the ones that hear music. So basically, how many of you think that this is booba? And how many of you think, there's one there, okay? Would you please talk to me after the lecture? How many of you think this is Kiki? So many more of you think this is Kiki. And how many of you think this is Kiki? Many of you. Booba, only one. We are all our synthesities in a way. We have this kind. We are basically connecting now between the voice and the vision. So this is an important phenomenon that has not been studied very well, but it sheds some light on the metaphors in art and in literature. An Iraqi poet, his name is Muzaffar Nawab. It reminds me that he's a poet, and he is the founder of the popular poetry in Iraq, but he's a painter. Not many people know that he's a painter. So many artists, also painters, have other creative talents like writing or music. So they cross their territories to other creative areas. Now, I think the time is about to be over, but I have one thing to show you that I told you about the face, how important the face. Portrait. Most famous artists have painted portraits for themselves or others. Portrait appeals much more than the actual picture or photo for many reasons that I mentioned to you. Even a child can be trained to recognize 3,000 faces. I remember I was a child. My grandma did not really like to watch football. But one time I saw her, she was staring. The Chinese team was I think, the Chinese team was playing with the Iraqi team. And she was staring at the screen. I said, what's going on, Grandma? She told me, I'm trying to figure out how the judge can tell who is who in the Chinese team. Because they are all look very similar to her. I told her they will say the same thing about us. She said, no, your nose is bigger than your brother's. So because she knows me. So basically, the face is a very powerful thing. If you look at the face, and these artists know how to capture the essence of faces and show you the horrible and the beautiful faces if they want. You have about 43 muscles in the face, and you can make hundreds of expressions. Some of them are, as good as this, and some of them are more artistic. The brain has multiple patches for the face, multiple. Each one basically shows a profile of the face. And so that is a very important part in the physiology of facial recognition. People sometimes get damaged to one of these areas. They don't recognize faces. They see you, they know you from your voice, but not from your face. Or they know this is a face, but they don't know this is you. Because there are two areas, one for recognition of the face and one seeing the face. So there's a whole topic about the face, but here's an experiment shows that certain elements in the face are very essential for recognition. If you look at this, the Samir Zeki showed different parts of the faces and picked up the electrical output of the cells. If he shows two eyes, mouth, and circular surrounding, you get a great response. Only two eyes, very poor response. Only mouth, poor response. If you replace the rounded with a square, very poor response. So the best response you get, of course, obviously, if the monkey sees another monkey, or if the monkey sees a face that consists of the essential features, which are the roundedness and the eyes and the mouth. Many people say, how come Cubism has become so famous? Why? What's about these faces? Cubism, what they said, he said the picture usually depict only one profile. Why don't you go on, like we are moving around the body and have the images from the back, from the side, and put multiple faces to express multiple sides of the face or of the body. That's what the Cubism, the original Cubism is. So Ramachandran has a theory about the emotions that are triggered. He says that each facial frame is recognized by a single cell in the brain. So if you have multiple faces represent different emotions, you are going to stimulate different cells, and they all feed to the emotional center, the amygdala. So you give you a boosted emotional response. I'm not going to comment on this famous picture or portrait for a girl with pearl earring. This is for Vermeer, because you can look at it for hours and hours to figure out exactly what expression she's trying to convey, and you will reach to different conclusions. And the last one is this one is a recent accession to this museum. There's no picture that can express the fatal enigma of death. This is basically a funeral figure in one of the cemeteries. This is a man with a shroud putting his finger on called silence, the silence. Put his finger on the lips, closed lip. And if you can look at the face, the eyelids, the eyebrows, the face, it'll give you this huge morbidity and the very vague and lost and sorrow face. Because artists, again, capture the essence and they know how to portray it. Sometimes we can find the brain correlate, sometimes we can't, but at least that's what we are trying to do. I think this is the end. So the summary is that aesthetic experience is a combination of genetically wired brain mechanisms and individual memories and experiences, and usually it works on the essence capturing and grouping. Artists utilize brain mechanisms to produce emotions. Lines, colors, motions are all wired in the brain. Metaphors explain some individual variations. People have more connections, they see different metaphors, and people have very poor connections left. And some people think that the woman has more connections than a man. Men usually don't connect the dots, while women make nonsense connections between the dots. So it seems that this is something that people talk about it, who has more connections. And facial recognition is very important in art and science. That's the end of the lecture. I think there's no question and answer. I'm very sorry. That's a museum policy. But I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll hopefully in the future we can talk more.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shaibani. I think this was the perfect way to start off our inaugural lecture series, Art and the Brain, for this fascinating, illuminating lecture. I would encourage you all to go up to the galleries now and practice what you learned over the last hour and come back in the spring for the second in our series.
Remember to look out of the corner of your eyes, please.
Corner of your eyes. Thank you.